Welcome back to the Placeholder Podcast, everybody. Caley Fretz, we're here to talk about the weather. It's real cold where I am. Kit, tell us about your weather.
I don't know. I would like to start by saying, for once, it's not a Brit who's mentioning the weather first. And I think we've established that even living in Scotland, the weather's pretty decent compared to some parts of this podcast.
It's true.
Yeah, it's okay.
Jonny, would you say your weather's good, bad, mediocre?
My weather's good vibe. It's cold and crisp. I think it's also key to mention the reason Caley's bringing up the weather is because he's dressed up like how you see small French children learning to ski. That's sort of what he looks like at the minute. It's a full onesie.
I like to think Caley goes through life like a small French child learning to ski. It's a worldview.
Wow.
Well, that's Dane Cash. You just heard Dane Cash. Welcome, Dane Cash. I'm wearing, we bought this because I was jealous of my toddler, basically. Because she has these amazing snow outfits, and I have less amazing snow outfits, but now I have an equally amazing snow outfit. Anyway, we're here to talk about bikes, primarily, less about the weather, but I did want to introduce you to everybody. Dane, Jonny, Kit, joining us today. We've got a lot to talk about. We're going to talk about Quinn Simmons. We're going to talk about Richard Plugge Corner, which is one of our favorites. We've got a bit of Daily Pain today. And then we've got bonus at the end. So we do apologize. Last week, we kind of sprung this on everybody. But basically, we're doing extra podcasting for members only. So if you're listening to the members only feed, which you can identify because it has an orange logo, then you're going to get this whole podcast. Otherwise, sort of cut it off at about 45 minutes like we normally do. So the regular podcast, the free podcast, remains the same as it always was, but we're just adding a bit of extra chat, maybe an extra segment at the end for our lovely paying members. Because we do love you so much. We appreciate you. If you're not already a member, head over to escapecollective.com/join. Let's kick things off with one of our favorite recurring segments, Richard Plugge Corner. Of course, Richard, our favorite team general manager, running Visma Lisa Bike.
Journalist turned manager, right?
Yep.
I mean, he used to kind of be like
journalist turned manager.
One of us.
Well, yeah, well back in the day. Is that hope for us, or
yeah? I want to manage a team that wins all 3 Grand Tours someday. That's
Take
my goal.
over the world.
Yeah, that's my plan.
It's the aspiration of any journalist, right?
Probably.
There's a long history of this. Maybe we could do a bit more on it at some point. If you go back through cycling history, there's a fair amount of this. I mean, all the way back to Henri Desgrange, right? The man who started the Tour de France was a journalist, maybe more of a publisher, maybe a better way to describe him back then, although he did write for the paper as well. Yeah, so there's a long history of folks in our profession realizing that our profession is Sisyphean in many ways and going elsewhere at some point. Anyway, Richard Plugge Corner. So what do we got from Lisa Bike this week?
One cycling, Caley.
One cycling. Okay, tell me about it.
There's this new idea. It's this new old idea of Richard Plugge's. He's the latest guy to have this idea. What it boils down to is getting power back from the UCI and ASO, who are like by far the biggest race organizer, and just distributing the power and therefore the money a bit more evenly. I mean, we've spoken about this before, about how Richard Plugge's spent the past decade chasing after sponsors, trying to keep everything afloat. And then at the end of the day, he's not probably got that much to show for it personally. So he's probably like, you know what, enough of this. Let's try and reform things, sort of get all the teams and the managers and these sort of stalwarts of the sport together. And we can sort of plead our case and try and maybe get some money from Saudi Arabia in to help them do sort of a live golf thing. And the idea is like you package up the smaller races into a bundle, and then you can sell those broadcast rights. You fiddle about a bit with like riders' image rights as like another revenue stream. Just sort of basically try and Silicon Valley the traditional sport of cycling a bit, you know, sort of rip out inefficiencies, make more money based on intangible things. But the one problem is that he keeps on annoying all of the other team managers who are supposed to be his allies. So maybe he's just trying to do it on hard mode. Maybe this is a smokescreen for something else. It's hard to know. The reason it came back into the news is because he was speaking to a Belgian news site the other day, and he said that he needs the stars of the sport like Jonas Vingegaard to be more like Jake Paul, who is a social media person / boxer. And that's the quote that like caught the headlines from the interview. which is confusing.
So for our listeners out there who maybe are not super familiar with Jake Paul, can you to be more like Jake Paul?
Johnny, as
means
a 29-year-old, can you tell us?
Be more what? Yeah, as a 35-year-old, I am too old, and so therefore, Johnny, please explain as the sub 30 among us. If I was going, if for example, I was going to be more like Jake Paul, what would you recommend that I start doing?
Okay, so what you first got to do is you've got to time travel back to sort of the mid 2010s and make loads of videos on the Vine social media platform, where it's sort of, I think, 6-minute clips of like little pranks sketches or skits or something. And then you transfer that into becoming big on YouTube. You start rapping about such concepts as how it's everyday, bro, which is factually correct. Let's be clear.
That is true.
The one thing you can't have a go at there, Mr. Paul, about is factual inaccuracies. He's nailed that one. And then you then trade up again. It's like trading from like a bean to a telescope or something like that, where you then trade up to becoming sort of a boxer, and you like fight other social media celebrities, and you sell pay-per-views, you get more money. And now he's also dating. I think this is why he's come onto Richard Plugge's radar, is because he's dating an ice speed skater for Jumbo Visma.
Wow.
This Dutch woman. So then maybe that's why Jake Paul has suddenly like started creeping into Richard Plugge's algorithm. But he seems quite set on the idea that Jonas Vingegaard could also do this, and then that equals more money.
Yeah, the specific thing that he said was along the lines of, Jake Paul gets surrounded by screaming teenagers.
Yeah.
When he appears in public, and he wants that for Jonas Vingegaard, which, I mean, I can't imagine a cyclist less likely to want that to happen. But also, it's just kind of a weird thing. I mean, it's fame, right? It's a public image, but it's odd. And also that it was Jake Paul that was referenced, I guess, it's better than mentioning Andrew Tate or something like that. Some internet personality.
He does have, the connection to speed skating and therefore to Plugge in a way, but I could think of like dozens of basketball and football, American football stars who have done a really good job with their social media and become, world megastars that he could have referenced that were not Jake Paul. So that just makes it, that's just another one in a long list of things. It's like, oh, come on, Richard Plugge, stop trying to steal riders from other teams, and also like, don't reference Jake Paul. Pick someone else.
Don't reference Jake Paul.
Who is the most Jake Paul current pro cyclist?
Good question.
Tadej Pogačar?
Yeah, he's up there.
But the difference is that Jake Paul was an influencer, an internet personality before he was, as somebody generously attributed him, a professional boxer. And sure, he must have been boxing beforehand, maybe, I don't know, if you're going to be decent enough. But, you've got to be you've got to be talented at the sport before you become the personality. You've got to bring the personality with you in the sport, which Pogačar does. And
if you're like, in terms of who's the most Jake Paul, if you're just saying who's the best like social media influencer, that's one thing. But if you're actually saying who's the most like Jake Paul, that's a totally different question. Like,
definitely.
Then you have to find somebody who does prank videos and like, generally does dumb things for content.
Jake Paul is a combination of Tadej Pogačar, Mark Cavendish, and then the former Trek rider who shot that cat. I can't remember his name.
Jesus.
For people who want to, Antonio Tiberi, that's it.
Yeah.
For people who want to read up on Jake Paul, because it is quite a fascinating story and like a study of modern times. There was a whole year or like saga where he was basically running like this party house in this very nice sort of Los Angeles neighborhood, and it all got a bit crazy, and there were just great like local newscasts from like his road with just annoyed local man.
Oh, it was with his brother as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's really, really good.
Yep.
He's controversial, brother.
Yeah, he is more controversial.
I know this is kind of a silly segment, and that we're making jokes here, but there underneath it all is something more significant, which is the man who runs the sort of best, biggest, most powerful team in pro cycling, wanting more athletes to be like this, to be social media people. I don't know, that just raises all kinds of questions, because I think the sort of like the gravel space in the US, for example, is sort of toes this line between influencer and athlete, right? And I think that people go back and forth. Some people think that just being an influencer is fine and plenty, and if you have the following, you have the following. And there's a lot of athletes, I think, that really push back against that because they feel like well, my job is to race my bike fast. My job is not to make reels, right? And this does sort of open up a whole can of worms in terms of, well, the reason why your team is the biggest, best team in the world is because they're very good athletes. It's not because of their Instagram or TikTok abilities, right? And so, it just like, how do you square that? How do you square that circle there? Like, how do you, if this is what Richard Plugge wants out of his riders, how do you want that and also want them to be the best riders in the world? I don't think that really works.
I personally think that Pogacar is sort of the potential model there, in that he is both a really, really good bike racer and also really great at being a star, but good at being a public figure. This is why I think it's a bummer that he's referencing Jake Paul, because I think other athletes who do this well, who are really like LeBron and Steph Curry, both in basketball, are both world-renowned public figures who are also really good at their sport. And I think Pogacar can be that. And I don't know whether Jonas Vingegaard can be that. Jonas Vingegaard is never going to be Jake Paul. Like, he's never going to go that far. But that's for the best, because we don't need that. But Tadej Pogacar, I think, is that potential model where people like him. People like what he puts on social media. They know he has a personality. And that is really valuable, I think.
There are probably a lot of Colombians who might be in this sort of boat as well. Rigoberto Urán, mega superstar in South America. And he does post some interesting stuff on the Instagrams from time to time.
The key quote from Richard Plugge is how, and this is like this is where the contradiction comes in, because it's like quite a unifying call to arms. But on the other side, he's like tapped up Kian Utebrücker and Andreas Kron from Not a Destiny, which got mothballed. But he said that Visma Lease Bikes competition is not against the other teams. It's against the competition for eyeballs from other sports or from Netflix or from looking out the window. Like, the idea is that there's a whole like sort of marketplace of potential consumers and viewers, and it's about making cycling think more about how they can be better at that, which is what we talk about, right? A lot. We talk about how without the fans and the audience and everything that goes around it, it's just people doing exercise. And so at least Richard Plugge understands that, it seems, and there is sort of this willingness to look at what cycling is and how maybe it can be changed subtly into something slightly different.
Did he mention looking out the window as a potential thing I could do to like stay interested and have a good time? Because if he is that a Johnny thing or a Richard? Because I really love the idea of just like, I'm bored, I'll just look out my window and that will entertain me all day long.
That's Johnny's vision for the future.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. It's just the old grow the pie thing, right? It's because what he's talking about and the one cycling thing, yeah, they're not original ideas, right? That they are borrowed essentially from other sports that have tried to do the same thing or have successfully done the same thing. The reality is, at the moment, the only thing that cycling can really do is just sort of split up the pie differently, right? So like, there's lots of talk about, okay, well, why don't we share TV rights? Well, that's ASO's part of the pie, and they're not going to give it to you. That's just never, ever going to happen. So the only way for these teams to get where they want to go, or where Richard Plugge wants them to go, is to actually make that pie bigger, which means that the sport probably has to change in structure in some way, right? Like, what the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. If we go and do the 2024 cycling season exactly the same way that we did the 2023 and 2022 and 2021 and 2020 and back to the 90s and 80s and 70s, and expect it to suddenly change and that pie to get bigger, that is insane. And so I think that that's a big part of the pushback too, is that the acknowledgement that for these things to happen, for a one cycling thing to happen, for a breakaway league or a Saudi funded thing that takes on ASO, for any of that stuff to happen, we're talking about major shifts in the way that pro cycling is structured, both financially and just the way that, we watch it on television, the races that matter and things like that. So it's simultaneously like a silly thing that we talk about and we joke about on this podcast, and a absolutely massive shift if it was ever to actually occur, right?
The thing is as well, you have to ask, would it be better? Would everything be better if it was this sort of Richard Plugge-headed consortium of teams that had a bigger slice and more power in the direction of the sport? You can argue that if the UCI had less power, that probably would be a bit of a good thing, because we'd see them just like doing sort of crazy things. But then ASO seem to sort of run things quite well, even if it is a bit of a cabal. Like, the Tour is great. They don't mess with that too much. They sort of add races gently in. Like, they've recently started like Paris-Roubaix Femme avec Zwift is a good sort of innovation and something that was long overdue. So it's hard to say, like, what's the reason to want ASO to earn less money? Because they've been sort of a relatively stable and good steward of the sport, unless I'm barking up the wrong tree.
The reason would be that money could go to teams so that maybe there's less of a problem of big teams being on the brink of extinction like every year.
Yeah, but then...
they keep going.
They keep going.
So if I'm rich... If I'm Richard Plugge, that's what I want, because I want to have a franchise that I can make worth millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars, right? Like that's what Richard Plugge wants. If we're just looking at this from the fans' perspective, I'm kind of with you, Jonny. Is like I think that the sport needs to change a little bit. I think the calendar is absurd. I think there's lots of things that are really silly about it. But at the end of the day, you're talking about, like I said, you're mostly talking about taking the same pot of money and just moving it from ASO to teams. What does that really get us? The teams continue to exist. We haven't had a world tour with 11 teams or anything like that. Like, we haven't had this sort of terrible outcome that is often threatened. Yeah, teams come and go, and I think that is not great for the sport because it makes it hard to be a fan of anything for a particularly long time. But fundamentally, like, the races continue to exist. The stars are still there. The teams are still there. I mean, self-serving from team owners. We've talked about the same thing with like Jonathan Vaughters, and obviously they're going to work toward their own benefit here. But if we take a step back as just bike racing fans and look at it objectively, would a wholesale shift in the way that this thing operates eventually make a better sport? Maybe, possibly, but it would be pretty tumultuous in the meantime. And the only people that would benefit would be about 15 or 20 team owners, as opposed to all the rest of us.
And it could put a massive wedge between the World Tour and the lower tiers, where
it for sure would.
Yeah, and if you've got a smaller number of races where all the big names are drawn to, or the program is mixed up in a way that makes you don't get Pogačar and Roglic and Vingegaard missing out on each other for the whole season, which is kind of, I think, what Plugge wants. He wants more of that drama and more of that draw for the fans. But then if you have more of those big teams and the money being controlled by those big teams and the big names, then the smaller teams, and we're talking, even the small French and Spanish teams on the World Tour or on the Pro Tour, that would not work very quickly. It would be a matter of 1 or 2 seasons before Italian teams and those small teams that we see come and going with much more frequency, they would just disintegrate very fast and they wouldn't get any money because the money's all going to the top.
Also, I think if you give more money to teams, it's not like a trickle-down thing where suddenly like the domestiques or neo-pro guys are suddenly getting paid a lot more. Like, that money is going to be concentrated in getting the big stars on bigger contracts to lure them over. It's going to be concentrated in the team owners who like own it, and they can now turn around and be like, I own this franchise. Like, it's mine. I own a specific thing, like a World Tour place actually has like some value because there is this like slice of the pie, like owning a Premier League club, right? That's why you have all the investment there. So I don't think you can even make the argument that suddenly like the mechanics are going to get treated better and paid better because there's just an unending supply of people who either want to race in the World Tour or work in the World Tour.
All right, we've waffled on enough about the state of pro cycling. We try to avoid doing this as often as possible, but this is a particularly interesting story, and Plugge Corner is, of course, a mainstay of the Placeholder podcast. So we're going to take a quick break, come back in a moment.
Thank you, Richard.
Welcome back, everybody. You thought Richard Plugge Corner was over. You were wrong. Plugge was spotted drinking beers, the devil's juice, with Thibaut Pinot on a mountain somewhere. What happened?
Yeah, so it popped up on Instagram. Pinot and Plugge up close drinking beers in Teen, which I think is where Primoz Roglic trains famously, but it might also be where Visma Bike trains. I don't know. But yeah, so on the beers, Pinot has been permanently on the beers since December the 31st, probably before then. Yeah, it was a fantastic photograph for many reasons. Obviously, begins to get people staring about, what does this mean? Is Pinot being wooed?
Thibaut Pinot as director sportif for Lease Bike next year?
Or as consultant in human decency. I don't know. How to be a nice person on a bicycle team. I don't know. No, it was it was a joyous photo, and it continues the whole Pinot is living his best life theme that has continued since his last race.
The thing as well is that Pinot is just more and more looking like he's just completed life and like sorted out the best life, because like he rode for years, was like a very celebrated rider and like a shed load of money, didn't win a whole bunch. Like this is usually Ronan's role in the podcast, to be like a Thibaut Pinot denier. Part of his thing was that he was like one of the big French riders, and he sort of was in a Groupama FDJ and like so integral to that team's like identity. So like he played that one perfectly, squirreled all his money away in some lovely sort of mountain retreat with all of his animals. But then he's also just like going off to watch PSG versus Borussia Dortmund in the Champions League, drinking loads of beers, holding two at once, which is sort of like him like living out his university days, but as an adult with a lot more money. So it looks great. And then now he's just in teen, like first week of January. Like first week of January sucks, and he's just in teen skiing. So
I'm just thinking of all the.
I'm just jealous.
All the much better beers that I would drink if I had a college style approach to partying, but also was not a college kid. Where because in college, you get the cheap stuff, right? But Thibaut Pinot, he doesn't have to buy the cheap stuff. He's a monument winner. I bet he has a great time.
Yeah, but he's over 30, so he can only drink like 3 beers anyway. He's going to be
but that's cheaper, I guess. So that helps in a way. It saves money that way. So yeah.
I was just going to say that I think Pinot can drink more than 3 beers, because it's not like he's been drinking beers for like more than a decade, so now he can't drink anymore. Whereas he's going at it from the
That's true.
What's the word?
You're saying he is a young man's liver.
Yeah, 100%. Like he can go out now and sort of attack the beers and then sort of run out of steam around like beer number 5 or 6 and then just get like brought back very quickly into the fold.
I wouldn't be at all surprised if he and Geraint Thomas are in the same club and that they've both gone as hard as each other in the off-season from time to time. I would not be surprised.
They should hang out.
Yeah, I think you're right.
But then again, that is only a few weeks out of the year, so you may be right. He's also acquired...
Stick with the light stuff.
He's also acquired a puppy in the new year, which only the best people do.
Oh, as you said that, your very cute puppy looked up at us.
Yeah,
we forgot to talk about this. Kit, will you please introduce us to the newest member of the Placeholder podcast?
Yeah, I have Lockie on my lap. He is my almost 12-week-old Cavapoo, and he's very warm, which is very nice.
You used to sit there and make the podcast with a hot water bottle on your lap, and now you have
that is
a puppy, and that's
literally
even better.
True.
Very adorable. And
just leveled up, yeah.
One thing I've noticed is that he will look up at you sometimes, especially if you're like making a point or you have something to say that you go on for more than a few seconds. It's like he looks up like, that's a good point. Like he'll stare up and think, I
feel
agree
judged.
With Kit on that.
What are you saying?
That he has opinions, and I like that.
I mean, I feel judged by him. He's just looking at me and saying, "What are you on about? Pipe down. I'm trying to sleep here."
Oh, there's that.
Kit, what's happening in cyclocross?
What's happening in cyclocross? Yeah, so I mean, we've had the Christmas period, which is always jam packed with perhaps too much bike racing, and it's very hard to pick out what's happened one day to the next. But it's made a lot easier when Mathieu van der Poel is racing, in that he wins every single race he turns up to. As of this weekend just gone, and the objectively brilliant Zonhoven with its massive amphitheatre sandpit, that was his 10th in a row. He only won by 20 seconds, though, and he said he needs to go to training camp to get some form back. Obviously, he is far superior to his rivals at this point, but he was winning by 2 minutes to Wout van Aert earlier in the Christmas period. And there's Mathieu van der Poel on the one hand, who is just smashing it in the World Champs jersey. Interesting to see how that affects his road season, if at all. Then on the women's side, Fem van Empel has also been absolutely crushing it. She did have a bit of an injury that she's been dealing with for a little while, but that didn't hold her back too much. And she's had some great competition from the likes of Lucinda Brand, Puck Peters, Celine Del Carmen Alvarado. I'm going to miss somebody out. Zoe Bagsted won a great race on Saturday. Yeah, so the women's side has been a bit more punchy in competition. But yeah, it's. I think actually this year, although there have been the same names at the top of the standings, there's been some pretty damn good racing, even if it is predominantly absolutely disgustingly muddy.
Have we heard like a reason why Van der Poel has gone like so hard this cyclocross season? Is it like a symptom of he won so much on the road last year that he can now concentrate and like pick up these sort of the start bonuses because he's got to pay for his massive gold car? Or is it a symptom of Pidcock and Van Aert maybe not being as focused on cyclocross, so then he just looks that much better than everyone else?
Pay for his car and also fines for expectorating. Is that the word on people?
I think you can cover that fine. The maximum UCI fine is like it's like a couple hundred
Well, if
francs.
you're turning up in a Lamborghini every week to a muddy bike race, I think you're fine. Yeah, I think to answer your question, Jonny, I think it's partly that Van Aert he said, I don't really care about losing. I'm sure he does a little bit, but he doesn't care about losing to Van der Poel over the sand and mud quite so much as he would if he continues to do that on the cobbles, because he's really going hard for the cobbles classics this year. He wants to get one of those monuments. And Pidcock he's had some pretty decent races, but he's been a bit sick and he hasn't raced as many as he hasn't even raced his full restricted calendar. And Van der Poel also had a really horrible season last year until the end, when he did, of course, win the World Championships. He was plagued by injury, so maybe he felt he had a point to prove. Yeah, and he's approaching this year differently. He's not going to do the Tour de France, so he's hitting the winter hard, and then he'll have a big spring, and then he'll peter out a little bit in the summer, and then hit the Olympics hard. So I guess we'll see, but he obviously came into this with much different objectives than the other two of the big three.
We have one more little news hit here, which is formed in tragedy. I think it's worth talking about. There's a story over the weekend. Dane, summarize this story for me from our friends over at Velo.
So they interviewed Quinn Simmons, I guess, at the Trek camp, and he mentioned something that I certainly didn't know this. I'm not sure how publicly known this was, but he was chasing Gino Matter on the day that he crashed and ultimately died at the Tour de Suisse. And Simmons said that after that incident, he, quote, flew home and was pretty convinced I was never going to race a bike again. And obviously was very affected by that incident, which is, I don't know, completely reasonable if you're behind someone who has that happen to them. And so it seems like Simmons came close to calling it a career, basically. He said he spent the week before Nationals with his family, made a deal with himself that he'd go all in, win the race, and then ultimately he's going to continue racing. But paid tribute to Mader in his tour. He won the U.S. national title this past summer and said he, again, this is Velo, quote, vowed to carry the jersey in the Tour de France in part to honor Mader. So Quinn Simmons not going to be leaving the peloton, but it sounds like he came pretty close to it because of the horrible day on which he was right behind someone who ultimately died in a crash.
Yeah, there's a fair amount of chatter here in Durango because obviously Quinn is from here, his family lives a couple miles from my house where I'm sitting right now. But like what was going on with him in sort of the end of the year last year? And I think that no one really had the answer to that. And this draws a line between 2 points. And it's kind of hard to imagine having to continue racing after experiencing something like that. I mean, like I struggle to go downhill fast now just having had children, right? Like it changes the way that you do risk assessment. I can't imagine trying to race my bicycle with, 100-something other people going 50, 60 kilometers an hour on a regular basis or faster after experiencing that. I'm glad that he's continued racing. I think that's a good thing. It's a good thing for American cycling. So that was a rough summer.
Also interesting to sort of think about the fact that I feel like when Gino Mader died, obviously the whole team that he rode in was going to be devastated. The Swiss cycling scene, he was a Swiss rider, was going to be devastated. But I think it also sort of brings home that everybody in the peloton is going to be affected by this, especially if you were chasing him in the race at that moment. It really did have a wide impact, not just team, country, close friends, but I mean it's going to affect everybody when that happens to a fellow professional athlete in a race you are doing. I think it makes you really think twice about what it is that you do for a living and the fact that there really are inherent risks.
Yeah, and that it's a hugely dangerous sport. I mean, I haven't been covering the sport for that long. I've been covering the sport since 2010, and I have personally experienced 3 of these already. 2 of them at the races I was at. So it's a phenomenally dangerous sport, and an unfortunate reminder of that. And I guess the broader point here, and the reason we wanted to bring it up is just to say that we're glad Quinn's still racing, but I think everybody would have understood if he wanted to stop. And on the other hand, anyway, let's take a quick break here, and we'll come back with a little bit of weekly pain. Welcome back, everybody. It's time for Weekly Pain. We're going to bring back our member contestants. I think next week or the week after, Dane. We're getting that organized, but this week we're just doing a Weekly Pain with the crew that is here. We're starting over from a points perspective. New year, new competition. The winner of Weekly Pain 2023. Actually, we had a tie between Dane and Jonny with 7 points.
Wow, I didn't.
Congratulations,
Congrats,
guys.
Jonny. It's an honor to share the victory with you.
Congrats, Dane.
Each won half of a gold medal, and those are in the mail. They're headed your way, but we are wiping the slate clean and kicking off this year's Weekly Pain with a single game of categories. You guys know how to play this one. We go around between the three of you. You have to name something within the category that I specify. If you cannot, it moves on to the next person. All three of you cannot, then, well, you're all back in, and we kind of start over. I thought it'd be fun, just as a little primer for the 2024 season. Get your head wrapped around who is on all of these World Tour teams, where different riders have gone. We're going to start with give me a rider on the 2024 Little Trek Men's World Tour team. Anybody. And we'll go around until you can't anymore. Let's kick off with Dane. Give me a name.
Teo Gegenhardt.
Well done. Correct. Jonny.
Quinn Simmons.
Correct. Kit.
Toms.
That's an easy one. All right. Back to you, Dane.
I have
It's
one,
gonna
and
take
I'm
a
like,
while.
but now that we're playing this game, I'm like, wait, is he still on the team? No, it's not even that. I'm like, did he change teams and I didn't catch it? Malcolm Mullen was still there, right? Great.
Malcolm Mullen is still there. Jonny.
Mads Pedersen.
Mads is still there.
Matthias Skjelmose.
Jasper
Dane.
Stuyven's still there?
Stuyven's still there. 31-year-old Jasper Stuyven. We're getting old now. Jonny.
Giulio Ciccone.
Ciccone is still there. Kit.
Cataldo.
Cataldo is still there. 38-year-old Dario Cataldo still racing in the World Tour. Dane.
Cataldo's where you went next? Man, I was never going to come up with that one. Yeah, we really are.
Coming up against it now.
I got another one that I think he's gone, though.
5,
Come on, Dane.
4, 3, 2,
Is Edward Toon still there?
1.
Oh,
Yes, Edward Toon's 32-year-old Edward Toon's still racing for Little Trek. Jonny.
Juan P. Lopez.
Yep. Juan Pedro Lopez. One of 2 Spaniards on the team. Kit.
Carlos Verona.
Yep.
Ooh.
He's the other one. Does that count as a tip there? I don't
Seemed
know.
like a
little
cycling
hint.
tip.
I had that in my pocket already.
All right, well, the fact that I had
back to you, Dane.
go to the wire last time would suggest that nobody has come to me over the last 20 seconds. So, yeah, let's say Alberto Contador.
Alberto Contador has retired. Dane, you're out. Jonny.
Tim de Klerk.
Nice.
Oh,
Tim
yeah.
de Klerk
Of course.
has moved on
So
over to
weird.
Little Trek.
Jonathan Milan.
Oh,
Yep.
he is on
He was
it.
on it.
She's gotten some of the harder ones.
I
Yeah.
know. Jonny.
I think he's either Bahrain or he might be Little Trek. There, Filippo Baroncini. Is he Little? Is he not?
Nice. Nice.
Nope.
No, he was a late snatch
Nope.
from UAE.
Late snatch. Kit, if you can give me one, you are the first champion of 2024.
Ryan Gibbons.
Wow.
That's what I was trying
Correct.
to think
Yeah.
of.
Well done. Guys, I am impressed. That was you got like 3/4 if not more of the,
Who
of
did
the
we
total
miss?
roster there. So you missed Baggioli, Julien Bernard, Simone Consoni,
Fellini's who I've
Fabio Felline,
been around forever.
Dan Uhl, Alex
Oh, yeah.
Kirsch, Patrick Conrad,
Oh, of course. So many new
Jakob
signings.
Muscat, Thibaut Nice. It's a massive
Oh,
team, and it's mostly
damn.
new. That's why I picked this one.
Yeah.
Sam Uman. Who else? Natnel
Tesfacion.
Tesfacion. Yep, that one's hard to say.
It's a good team.
And Otto Vergaard. Yeah, it's a good team. It's
Yeah,
a good
well,
and very new team because they obviously have a lot more money than they had previously. Well, congratulations, Kit. I will mark you down as this week's Weekly Pain winner. Our final segment today, the end of this is going to be Placeholders After Dark, which is our members only segment. But we're just going to discuss, do a little round table here. We're going to talk about what the riders retiring in 2024, what we think they might do after they're done being pro bike racers.
Well, we'll be talking about like what Mark Cavendish might be up to next, Simon Geschke, Rigoberto Urán, Romain Bardet.
And it stems from all this talk about Thibaut Pinot and what he's doing with his life post-retirement. Bit of fun.
And because it's Placeholders After Dark, we can say whatever we want and there's no chance we get in trouble.
I'm not sure that's totally true. But
like the censors aren't listening.
I think you could still libel people even if it's behind a paywall. I think that's still
no, definitely not.
Slander, sorry. Anyway, we're going to cut the free show off there. If you are a member, join us over in Placeholders After Dark, and we will chat through some retirees. Otherwise, we'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.